More than half of the tunes that William Marshall wrote have as their titles names of people, and of these the majority are aristocrats. We have the Duke and Duchess of Gordon, of course, and their children, the husbands whom their daughters married, grandchildren, and friends of the family. But we also have a significant number of people who are local people whom Marshall would know and would meet almost daily, probably. And one of them is Dr. Laing of Fochabers. Now, he would be the family doctor. He was in Fochabers for quite a long time. Then he moved to Keith, and he did a little bit of work in Aberdeen as well. Marshall wrote a tune for him, nice tune, and he wrote a strathspey for Mrs. Laing. And the two tunes melodically follow much the same pattern. They've got a sort of family link between them, Dr. and Mrs. Laing. Now, what kind of doctor was Dr. Laing? Well, we don't know, of course, it's far too long ago. But a student of his in Aberdeen described him, after he'd seen him perform an operation, as a fiddling, twaddling bodach. Bodach is the Gaelic word for old man. Students, eh? Well, Dr. Laing and Mrs. Laing. And Mrs. Laing. There are going to be 4 tunes in this video, and the other 2 deal with the different category of named person, in other words, with the aristocrats. The first is the Duchess of Roxburgh. Now, Roxburgh is nowhere near Fochabers, it's way down in the borders, but the Duke and Duchess of Roxburgh were good friends with the Duke and Duchess of Gordon. I think partly because the Duke was Sir James Innes of Elgin originally, and although they lived in Floors Castle mostly, the Duke and Duchess, there would be some contact between them. The Duchess I know very, very little about. Just one little thing. She died. She predeceased her husband, who then remarried, and that, of course, is fine. except he married a woman called Harriet Charnwood of Brighton, by the way, except the marriage took place 8 days after the funeral. Oh well. She got a nice tune, did the Duchess. Now, our last named person is a very colourful character, and he is the 7th Earl of Findlater and Seafield, and his name, James Ogilvy. He became Earl at the age of 20 when his father committed suicide. I think he was at university or at college down in England when he heard that news, came back to Scotland, and after that he married Christina Teresa Murray. But that marriage lasted a matter of weeks, maybe 2 months or so. There was no divorce, but they separated. Now, in 1791, the Earl of Findlater and Seafield, James Ogilvy, made a joke. We all do that from time to time, and sometimes we're very successful and sometimes we're not. Nobody finds it very funny. Or you can't remember the punchline or something. This joke, however, had consequences. At a social event at which the Duchess of Gordon was not present, he made this joke to Brodie of Brodie, who was unfortunately a good friend of the Duchess. And the Duchess had a ship built for her, and it had copper sheathing on the hull just to make it more seaworthy. And the Earl of Findlater said this: I kent the Duchess has a brass neck and a brazen face, but I never kent she had a copper erse. Now, Brodie of Brodie, I presume, passed that back to the Duchess, who was not at all happy about the joke, didn't find it funny, and she took the Earl of Findlater to court. What happened next was even stranger, because the Earl then absconded, left Scotland, went to what is now Germany, to Saxony in fact, and never came back. He had lands. He was very wealthy and had lots of property and lands. He had lands in Saxony near Dresden, and he stayed there for a bit, and then he moved on to what used to be called Carlsbad, now Karlovy Vary in the Czech Republic, a beautiful spa town. He loved Karlovy Vary, Carlsbad, and he poured money into the place. He built walks and gardens and parks, so much so that to this day he's remembered in the shape of a 28-foot obelisk to thank him for all he did for the town. He also got his private secretary, Johann Georg Fischer, to buy property round about Dresden. Eventually, of course, and he improved these areas too, eventually, of course, the Earl died in 1811, and then a strange thing happened. It was discovered that in his will he had left all of his continental property to the said Johann Georg Fischer, his private secretary. And the reason was very simple. The Earl was homosexual, and maybe that was part of the reason for his sudden departure from Presbyterian Scotland. I don't know, nobody knows. He was homosexual, and Johann Georg Fischer was his partner, as we would now say. And so he left him all these lands and all these buildings and so forth. Well, this bequest was challenged in the Scottish courts on the grounds that it was made for an immoral purpose, and I don't know the outcome of the challenge. It could well have been successful. But Johann Georg stayed on in the area, and when he too died, he was buried beside the Earl in a grave in Loschwitz. All of this leads up to this one tune, Cullen House. The Earl of Fiddle, when he was living in Scotland before he disappeared, lived in Cullen House, and William Marshall wrote this tune for the Earl and the house.